Okay, continuing on some of the printing and auxiliary effects. This one here is the consecutive numbering. I don't want you to give me several pages in a row from a magazine or a book. That's not consecutive numbering. What we mean by consecutive numbering is that there's 3 separate impressions, and all of those page numbers are done at the same time. And in this case, this is done by a letterpress. This strip is run through kind of like probably a rotary press. It runs around. Every time it goes around, it clicks, and a new number. It advances to the next number and gives an impression. You can tell that. Let's see here. Slightly indented. Okay. Here's another example. I don't have 3 of them in a row, but here is some sort of I guess a ticket to some event. And obviously this is a unique number. And this was put on by a laser printer. What we call a variable data printing. Every time it prints an image, what they'll do is, in this case, they'll print the entire thing as a master. And there might be, 12 of these printed on a single page. And then it'll image this on a laser printer in the white area all at the same time, and then they cut them up. That's one way of doing it. I'll be showing some other examples of how they do the variable data. Here's scoring increasing. Pretty easy to find in any kind of packaging. The scoring is to make it to bend easier when they fold it, and also so that you get a nice smoother edge here on that fold. Notice how I fold that up and package it so it all fits on the page very easily. Another packaging here. Embossing. You can feel how it's raised. In fact, if you turn the other side, you can feel how it indents. See if you can see that. Really, really hard, but the extra is puffed up a little bit, okay? And that's because that is what we call embossing. And if it were the other side, that would be debossing. But since this is reverse, we don't call it debossing. If this was pushed in, then it would be debossing, but it's pushed out, so it's embossing. Another form, this is blind embossing, but this is a die cut. Both of these are done on the letterpress. You're going to see this at tonight's, at the Las Vegas Color Graphics Tour. Perforations. Yes.
With the variable data printing, I've seen some junk mail companies that looks pretty much like they wanted it to look as if they had done variable data printing on it, but it was just everybody got the same number printed on their junk mail. Can you tell with the loop?
No, you just tell if it's unique information. I don't have any samples right here to show you, but there's 2 types of variable printing. One is where the entire image is printed at the time of the impression of the variable data. That way you can embed somebody's name and address in a photograph because they print that information in the actual photograph. The other type of variable printing is they'll print up the entire product and leave areas blank where later you can run that master or that blank through and they will print on top of that. Usually that's just black and white printing, just black ink printed in those areas. But if it's unique information, that's how you tell it's variable data. Here we have a perforation, which you can tear away. Notice I highlighted the variation here in yellow. Some way, you just don't want to put the sample in the book. You want to somehow highlight it or explain up here what it is. Circle it. Let me know what you're referring to on the page. This is another example of die cutting, and you can see there's the envelope that has an opening here that's been covered with the cellophane. Okay, and where can I see that at? Here we go. Okay, see that's an insert, and there's a window opening, and the cellophane covers it. That's a cutout here. This cutout kind of looks like that the hand tore an opening there. and then whatever they inserted into it, you can see into it. You think this would get you to open the envelope up maybe? That's what they're trying to do. These kind of envelopes that put stuff on the outside to get you to open them up, they're called billboard envelopes. And here's hot foil stamping. This is a silver foil. It's highly reflective. It looks just like metal, as opposed to metallic ink is not quite as reflective as this. But this here is, this is done with letterpress, and so you can feel that this is a little bit indented here, like a little bit debossed. You don't feel it on the other side because it's thick cardstock. They don't deboss it so much that it punches through the other side, but they put enough pressure on it so that they can transfer that film. In fact, let me show you an example of the film I'm talking about. Question, Joe?
They call it hot press because they heat the area that's going to actually impress the foil on there.
Yeah, the metal, the die itself is heated up. And this is the foil stamping here. This is rolls of the foil. It's very thin, like cellophane. And so this would go through, and this melts, and it will adhere, the backside will adhere to that, and it will pull the foil with it. So whatever your metal area is for the die stamp, it'll push on that and then transfer that. Okay? You can actually do this with a laser printer. You can mimic this. They've got it. You can take this foil here, if it's a special kind that's, well, I think you can probably get enough heat out of a laser printer. What you do is, you print a solid black area. It could be a headline, a black and white photo, whatever, and it comes out of the laser printer. You tear off a piece of this and cut it the size that goes over that laser area, the toner area, and then you run it through again, and the heat in the laser printer will heat up the toner, and that toner will grab this, and when you come out, you just peel it off, and where the toner was, the black area, it will be the color of the foil. So you can hand get this effect. Here we have is pretty fancy stuff. This is holographic. But this is a foil, and it's melted onto your final piece after it's printed. Now here we have UV coating, and you can tell UV coating because it's very, very glossy. I think get some reflection on this. It's not so glossy that it feels like it's been plastic coated or laminated. And you can tell when you look really close that it has a texture to it. Lamination is totally smooth because it's just a piece of plastic stretched and heated over it. When you look really close, you can tell because what they do is they flood this area with an ink-like substance that's varnish, and it gives this coating. There's varnish, there's UV coating, here's an example of varnish. And I'm going to get some reflection off this. Can you see that some areas are reflected, but others are not? This is spot varnish. And notice that there is like a flare here of some lines. There you go. See that? There. Instead of having a colored ink put on the page, it's just a varnish. Very subtle. And you can hardly see it without reflecting. But when you get a reflection off of that thing, it pops it out. It makes it look a little more interesting. Spot varnish, as opposed to a flood varnish where you do the whole page like the UV. UV is a little thicker, heavier, and it's set with ultraviolet light. So, but you get a different feel to it. Getting into some of the bindery type things. Okay, this is a Z-fold. It looks like a Z, huh? But if you have multiple ones, they're also called an accordion fold. So there's the Z fold. So this is an accordion fold. It's like a Z. You know, they just fold it every other way. I'm not very good at the accordion, but okay, question.
UV cutting is applied with an offset press as opposed to a silk screen?
UV cutting? Coating. UV coating is applied on a press. Yeah, they just put it on one of the ink, in the ink wells, and whatever the pattern is on the plate, if it's a flood, then it covers the whole area. If it's a spot, then there'll be an image. Now, previously I showed you this, remember? Where they took the image, the photograph is glossy, but the background is not. That's the paper you're seeing. The paper is glossy, and then they put a matte ink on top of it so that only where they want the glossy, the paper to show through. That's a different effect, but it's similar. They could have printed this on a brown paper that's matte, and then went over and put a gloss spot varnish on top of the image to get it to gloss.
How do you know the difference?
How do you know the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, well, I know from this one because it came from National Geographic and the paper was glossy.
But what if you don't know?
Well, you know the difference between is how the surface of it looks. Okay, lamination is smooth and very thick and very glossy. UV is very, very glossy too, and it's got a thick surface to it, but you can see a texture to it. Spot varnish, it's not as thick, it's more subtle. And varnishes come in glossy varnish, semi-gloss, matte varnish. Okay, UV coating is always glossy. Different effects. The last tour we went on, it said you can get the same kind of effect lots of different ways. Either through paper, and the finish on the paper, or finishing you put on the paper afterwards, or inks, or spot, varnish. All different kind of things can give the same kind of effect, and I was just showing you some examples here of that. Okay. Other types of binding you want to have some samples on. What kind of binding is used here? Well, as you can see, there is right here a staple. If I open this thing up to the center fold, you can see the staple right there. This is what you call saddle stitching, because it'll sit on a saddle, it'll fold like this and sit on a saddle, and then it'll get stitched right here like that, and this paper clip is made. Staple is made. Okay, you saw that in the tour we went on at Nevada Colored. And so you can see that what you have is just these tents that are put together, and they're stapled together like this. That's fairly common. This is just a heavy-duty brochure. Now, what kind of fold is this? Is this a Z fold? This is a roll fold. Well, I don't know what they call it. It's not a roll fold. See, they fold it in half, and then they fold it in half again. I'm not asking you to produce too many different kinds of folds, but to be aware of them.